Thanks very much indeed. And I think, just trying to shape this question in the most constructive way, some of your best innovators are going to come from the supply chain. And so perhaps each of you in turn could talk a little bit about your relationship with the supply chain, how you can encourage innovation within the supply chain, and perhaps even help them fund some of that innovation, because it's very difficult to find funding for a brand new product which doesn't quite fit to the current product that's being produced. So perhaps, Geoff, if you'd like to pick up first.
Yes, it is difficult, and I think composites is a great example. We've looked for many years around the greater use of composites in surface warships for weight purposes, low maintenance, those sort of things. When I started my career with Vosper Thornycroft, we were building the Sandown class mine hunters, and obviously that was quite cutting edge in terms of composite technology for shock resistance and that sort of thing at the time. And I saw early in my career the benefits that composites can have in the military market. But again, achieving approvals through regulation and that can be challenging, and that's where I guess the bigger companies like ourselves can help the smaller companies through that process. We work with SMEs across the company a lot through our programs and through some of our research and technology programs. We've recently teamed up with Barclays Eagle Labs, which is an innovation fund that Barclays work with to invite small SMEs to come and bring us their ideas for new technology in a few areas. And that's a new thing we're trying at the moment, and we're getting quite a good response to that. So there's lots of ways of doing it, but I think looking at those different methods of engaging companies that you wouldn't naturally meet otherwise, just going through a normal defense supply chain, and looking at the technology they can bring. And particularly if you look ahead at the next 10 years, the pace of innovation and the pace of technological change in our market is increasing all the time. So we need to be able to respond quickly to that. And best will in the world, a big prime like BAE Systems is not the most agile company, no. And we need that. We need that agility and innovation of working with technology companies and innovators across the supply chain. So very, very open to it. And I said things like the Eagle Labs is a way of trying to engage a new set of suppliers.
And Linton, can I just take your views on that?
Yeah, I think certainly in terms of the supply chain, because we live quite considerably in the commercial space, we have the benefit of a wider view sometimes from we have military projects, but we also have sort of cutting edge, even the fact that we dry dock 100 ships a year, and we see products from lots of other nations coming into the yard, so we can actually understand the technology on board. So I think in terms of driving innovation, we've got a wide view of emerging technologies. We don't have the level of R&D funding that potentially that BAE have to invest, but certainly we are very open to new technology. I think I didn't mention, my colleague over there was talking on Kongsberg, but we've had a good collaboration with Kongsberg over the last few years. We built Sir David Attenborough to what was Rolls-Royce, but now Kongsberg design, and we learnt an awful lot about emerging technologies, particularly around the propulsion lines, and we actually engaged with an awful lot of UK supply chain to support us in that project, and who brought some things to us that we didn't even know existed. So I think the fusing of the commercial, and John made the point earlier, I think the military projects, the RFA, we've had a two-way flow of innovation actually during the RFA plus the contract. RFA were actually leaders in installing ballast water treatment plants for the new regulations coming in. We actually used a lot of the work that we did on that to actually install plants on commercial ships, but equally the RFA has benefited from our ability to, if you like, look at best practice entering the yard from commercial customers coming into dry dockings.
Thank you. Jonathan, do you want a quick comment? And then I'm going to come back. We're running out of time. I'm going to come back to First Sea Lord because it'd be a waste of time to have him here and not talk about the strategic threat. So I'm going to come back there.
Yeah, quickly on supply chain then, and SMEs in particular, and even composites, I think was in the original question. I mentioned the Arrowgib Innovation Centre, Innovation Campus at Rosyth, where that's a fantastic opportunity for Babcock to engage with a whole range of SMEs in new technologies, including composites. And the only other thing I'd say quickly is that philosophically, from the Babcock viewpoint, the supply chain door is always open. we are always willing and have mechanisms through our website and ultimate and lots of opportunities to engage with the supply chain team, who are excellent people, and I work with them a lot in business development. So if a company has a new idea, has an edge, then the door is open to come talk to us.
Firstly, if we can just capture your presence, and having come back from a conference or from a launch, just could you perhaps just talk about where you see the strategic threat, not just from a military perspective, but perhaps even a business perspective?
So I think we are trying to get our minds round what near immediate pressing danger through war in East and Southeastern Europe looks like today, and what that means for our national resilience and our ability still to operate, set against a long-term strategic challenge being posed to us by China and others, but specifically China, as they seek to fundamentally reshape the international rules-based order, for want of a more elegant phrase, that we have grown up in, like operating within. And it's quite a deep philosophical battle that I think we're engaged in now. And it's not just a military one. It's an economic one. It's a way of life. It's a challenge to international organizations and institutions. The United Nations was set up in the aftermath of the Second World War to create a forum which would oversee an international rules-based system. And right now that is under challenge, and it is being threatened by two members who are permanent, have permanent seats on the United Nations Security Council. So we've got to be in no doubt that there is an existential threat, which is both short-term, Eastern Europe, with what Russia is doing with its illegal invasion of Ukraine and how that is playing out, but also the longer term. The integrated review refresh, I do recommend you look through it, because it is going to shape government policy ahead, and it looks beyond the term of this government, regardless of what one might read about the polls. It is sense it's not a major course correction. It's a gentle just rebalancing of where we see the risks and how we're going to address them, and it is not purely a security one. It looks more broadly, but those same perspectives are being shared by the US, who are in Washington, very strident but they're sort of bicameral, looking across the two oceans at the moment, and a number of other nations who we're seeing around the world themselves are having to confront that a non-aligned position may not actually be a viable construct to go ahead. Most recently, a couple of weekends ago, I was in Delhi for the Raisina dialogue, and it was very interesting to see India, who have very carefully tried to navigate a non-aligned path for the last few decades, now recognizing that alliances are going to be part of their security future. And that's both security in an economic sense and a trade sense and a diplomatic sense, as much as it is in a sort of traditional conventional military sense. Now, they will make their own calls on that, and they are also very focused on their own internal resilience. But you can't be so internally resilient that you don't need anybody else. What you need to understand is who are the allies and partners that you can trust and depend upon, and who are those whose hand of friendship may not quite be so permanent as you would wish. And that's to an extent what AUKUS represents, which is another of those steps in a kind of very long-term fundamental relationship. So it's just going to get harder, I'm afraid, not easier, for us to work out the world in which we operate. But in becoming harder, and certainly from my perspective, and I think more broadly, we have to look at this in upside terms. I think all of us in the room are naturally optimists, and so we want to look for opportunity. But we have to do so within the context of what is the shared endeavor we're on. Now, each of us is driven by different motivations. I have a unitary shareholder. It's called the Secretary of State for Defence, and hence the government. You have many others that you need to satisfy. But we are intertwined in a way that I think we haven't necessarily been for a very long time in how we respond to some of the threats that we now face arraigned against us. And the option is either to build those partnerships and alliances and to enable each other to be successful, or it's not. And I know which camp I would rather be in.
Thank you very much. I think we're going to have to draw this to a close now on time, but I'm very conscious that I started this whole conference by saying, if you don't know where you're going, you can never be on the wrong road. I think today's presentations and the discussions we've had show that we all know where we're going. It's just a matter of trying to get there now. And on your behalf, I'd just like to thank the panel and the presenters for an excellent morning, and thank you very much indeed. Thank you.